Okay. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General GL Section 30A, subsection 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Southborough Municipal Technology Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Now tonight, I don't think we're actually allowing any remote participation, but we are obviously broadcasting it. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and the parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on this Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at southboroughtown.com/remote meetings, as well as streaming on YouTube and recording on YouTube. No in-person attendance of meetings no in-person attendance of meetings of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means like YouTube. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website and YouTube an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceeding as soon as possible after the meeting. But of course, it's being recorded and it's being streamed live on YouTube, so it's should have coverage there. All right, it is 7:02. Call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes.
Matt, just real quick, because we have a couple people not on video, they will not show up on the recording. Roll call attendance is in order.
Okay. Good. Okay. So roll call for attendance. So I'm Matt Probst. Will Warren.
Here.
Jeff Bradbury.
Here.
Larry Sandberg.
Here.
Okay. Great. And also Tom LaFlemme.
Here, sorry.
All right. All right. Approval of minutes. Larry, do you happen to have the minutes from our last meeting that we can do?
Yeah, give me a second. I'll pull them up.
Okay.
Minutes. This was May 4th, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, let me share my screen. I'll make them bigger. Give me a second so that you can see them. Actually, I'm going to put them on the other screen because the other screen is bigger. Share. Okay, can you see them?
Yes. Yeah, it looks good so far for me.
Okay, I'll scroll in a second.
Are you going to send out a draft?
I can. I sent out a draft to Matt, but I wasn't sure I was allowed to send it out to everybody, so I didn't.
You can send it out to everybody, is my understanding, as long as they don't respond to you except at the meeting.
Oh, okay. Then I will. From now on, I will do that. I'm sorry.
So if we would help, we could wait for approving these minutes until our next meeting.
That would be fine with me as well. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll hold off on approving these, give you a chance. My apologies, must have missed that email, Larry. But yeah, feel free to just send it out to the whole committee in the future.
Yeah, basically, if it's administrative, you can send it out. But again, if there's any changes, that's not starting to communicate changes is not okay.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll know that next time.
Yep.
Okay, so let me stop sharing then.
So agenda for this evening. First of all, thank you everyone for taking time. I know it's only been a few weeks since our last meeting, but there's obviously our last meeting was pretty packed, and we're trying to play catch up in terms of our discussion. So the first item on the list, I want to start digging back in again about COVID-19 situation and risk mitigation via technology. I'd love to find out how things are going within the town from your perspective, Tom, how the virtual meetings are going.
Yep.
Any discussions on modifications to Zoom. So a couple of questions I have. Yep. Modifications to Zoom, like, is everybody liking it? Is there any possibility of moving towards 2 webinar things so that we have more remote participation? And I think the second question I have is we had a lot of discussion around potentially after things start opening up again, is there a prospect to be able to continue using Zoom, etc.? So
yeah. So thus far, I think everyone has liked Zoom, or I haven't heard many complaints. Committees are certainly starting to book more and more. We have next week, this week, we have, I think, 10 meetings in 4 days. And that was as of yesterday morning. So many of you might have even increased since then. We have run into just a couple of conflicts that, having the 2 webinars would be potentially helpful. But generally we've been able to work around it. Whether it was shifting one meeting a little bit earlier or, choosing a different day, or like we're having a meeting today that doesn't have the public input. Okay. And given the scheduling that we're scheduled against the selectmen talking about budget tonight, I don't know how much we would have gotten public participation anyway today. So, it's going to be something that we're going to continue to evaluate. Again, there hasn't been that many conflicts where people are like, no, I absolutely have to have it. I had one this week that, one of the committees booked the room 4 weeks ago and another one tried to book it, on Thursday. And I had to say, well, first come, first serve. Sorry, that's the only fair way I can do this. And generally, I do try to have conversations with the other committees, see if they're willing to at least consider shifting out of the public comment, depending on their subject matter and whatnot. So again, I think it's going to be an ongoing discussion within the town, whether or not we spend the money. Right now, there's a lot of extra spending going on in general to cover COVID expenses. So right now, I think we're going to hold pat with where we're at. But I do have, as I said last meeting, I have 3 other people right now that are helping to manage these meetings. I'm hoping to get another 2 to 3, especially those that might be already involved in meetings as a staff liaison, or they're always there as a minute taker, or whatever the purpose is, just to limit the strain on the rest of us that are having to sit through numerous meetings. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
a lot of times
it's a lot of effort. Yeah.
no, well, and a lot of times it's just sitting and waiting to see if someone has a problem. You know, it's a matter of getting the live stream going, and then if there's a problem, you know, luckily, you know, I end up doing other things, work related, while I'm sitting there with an ear to the meeting. There was one meeting that I was in that they were trying to book the room, or they were trying to schedule their next meeting without looking at the calendar. And luckily I was there, and I said, oh, you know, that room's not available. So they quickly shifted. So that's why you probably saw an email come out reminding you to check the room before you selected meeting date. So, you know, other than that, I've worked with a couple people on remote sessions to, you know, troubleshoot problems. And as far as I know, it's going relatively smoothly. So
That's great. You haven't had to join multiple meetings concurrently, like with 2 different laptops.
There was one day when, before I had trained anyone else on doing these, I actually had to, actually, I remoted onto one of the servers to do it because I had a Chromebook here. Well, Chromebook doesn't give you all the controls, like the go live and whatnot. So, so I found, yeah, I found creative solutions to the problems, which is my underlying job description most days. So, and to answer your question about going forward, I think there is going to be, at least for the foreseeable future, some element of Zoom being part of the meetings, whether it's to just broadcast, whether it's, you know, instead of just dialing in for remote participation, being able to do it by video. To that end, I've mentioned it to the emergency management director, and you know, I'm kind of looking at it myself as well, that investing in at least one room camera setup, basically, so that, you know, even if it's just in one of the conference rooms in town, even if it's at public safety, you know, that we have that capability to have, whether it's multiple cameras or just one camera that's on the meeting table, whatever the case may be, but evaluating the best solution for that going forward.
Will that require some modification of the remote attendance rules, though? Because I mean, right now they're suspended, right? So
right. So that's the big caveat. You know, so if we were to go back to where we were before, I'm not even going to say normal, because we can't use, you know, the word normal going forward. If we go back to before the governor's order, we could do remote participation by Zoom or by whatever the platform. And in fact, I think Matt may have done that once before, but that would require a physical quorum in one location. So
it also require, I mean, I attended one meeting once remotely, and I had to fill out a form, and I mean, there was a bunch of stuff that needed to happen. So would we be moving back to that kind of thing?
So again,
that's the worst case scenario,
right? So
moving back to that,
that if everything were reset to where we were pre-COVID, yes, that would be the scenario. But we could certainly be using it for, like we said the last meeting, bringing in a consultant from across the country, across the world, whatever, you know. So there was that thrown around. But again, if I were looking in my magical crystal ball, if I wish I had one, because I would have predicted this and invested in Zoom a long time ago. You know, in all seriousness, though, I think that there is going to be some pressure to the legislature to relax the remote participation rules for, I would say, at least a year, you know. And then once we've been in this for a year, I think it's going to be a little bit of the new status quo of how we might be able to do meetings. I do think that having people in one place physically where the public can come in and gather and interact face to face will be preferable. But, you know, there may be other situations that allow for it.
Question. back when things were normal.
Yes.
Were we allowed to have the remote participation of guests without going through any rigmarole? Was it just members where we had to worry about that?
That is a good question. I believe that it was just for guests. I mean, sorry, just for members, because of the voting status of it. But that, I mean, it wasn't ever really brought up, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think that most of the focus, like Tom said, it was on requirements for members, and you had to have a quorum, and people could members of the committee could participate remotely as long as you filled out the form and you still maintained quorum within the physical room. I don't think there was much there wasn't much detail on remote participation by members of the public. Like, in fact, I think I talked to Jim about this, saying, "Hey, is there anything that's preventing us from having remote participation in the public?" And he said, "No, nothing says for or against it, including
or consultants."
Or consultants, yeah.
Right. I think the one caveat that I've heard of in the past, and this is going back a few years to when it came up here in Westford, was you do have to be careful if you're just opening it to the public, because if you, for example, if Mr. Litt wanted to join in on the meeting and dial in, and we only have the ability to have one person call in, that's giving preference to one member of the public over everyone else, whereas this now theoretically opens it up more. So, it might actually be more beneficial to have this type of platform for public participation remotely.
Yeah. I think moving forward, I love the idea of just what independent of the quorum,
right.
What the committee itself has to do is moving forward, offering this with the webinar, so any member of the public can join remotely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay. Was there anything else that you were looking for that I didn't cover in that?
I think that's good for me.
Okay. I will say that Northborough actually reached out. Vanessa Hale had been talking to her contact in Northborough, and they were asking how we were doing meetings. So I actually joined a meeting with their town administrator, town clerk, fire chief, a couple other people, and explained what we were doing and gave them the kind of rundown. So seems to be catching on. So
that's great. That's great. Yeah, thanks for all your efforts and facilitating all these things. It's nice to know that our town is still, it's basically find a way of mitigating the risk and, continuing to function.
Yeah,
leveraging the technology. And I think, as Will, you had mentioned before, I think there are some benefits that will be long lasting beyond this, because we're discovering that for certain people, especially who are not as mobile or may have other disabilities, this opens up the opportunity for participation even beyond what they could do before. So,
right.
Okay, so on COVID, is there anything else we should be discussing? I know that the upcoming, I haven't heard the latest plans for town meeting.
Yeah.
What are the latest
So
plans on that?
the latest on that is June, I want to say 16th. It's a Saturday. I can verify the date, but at Trotter School, with the primary room being the gymnasium, with the potential of overflow to other spaces. So they're contracting. I don't know if anyone attended the town meeting a few years ago for that involved the public safety building, that there was overflow from the auditorium into the cafeteria, and they brought in an outside company to basically facilitate the video feeds between the different locations. So I believe that is what is proposed at this point. I'm still unclear what types of displays we would have in remote rooms.
They had projection TVs for that particular overflow situation.
Right. So my big question is, I put together the PowerPoint presentation for the motions and whatnot, and the moderator definitely wants those up on the screen, but getting them in a clear way is part of the challenge. So it's something that I'll be working with Southborough Access on, and the town clerk, town moderator, town administrator. It's going to be a big group effort on how to get that as effective as possible. And as I understand it, they're trying to do an abbreviated warrant, by postponing indefinitely several articles. Of course, that's all at the will of whoever shows up at town meeting. The moderator can say, we don't think this one's important, we can hold it off till the fall. And if there's a majority in the room that says, nope, we need to take it up today, then we take it up. So the understanding that I have is that moderator, the selectmen, everyone involved is really hoping that there's no politics involved, basically, where someone says, oh yeah, we'll let it go, and then they stack the room and vote something through. So
the proposal is to have a follow-up meeting in the fall.
Yeah, there's already going to be a fall town meeting to take up some capital items and then some other things. So, the idea at this time is that they'll postpone indefinitely several articles with the understanding and agreement with the proponents of those that it's going on the fall town meeting, and it's just a matter of the semantics of the motion. Because if you table to a date certain or postpone to a date certain, you have to know that date when at the time of the motion, and we don't know that date at this time. So they're just kind of hedging their bets to be able to close this meeting out.
Hey, Tom.
Yep.
Any reclosure, any, going back to where we are right now, lockdown.
Yep.
That would be decided by Charlie?
I believe so.
Okay. So the town doesn't risk any liability here in having a town meeting as long as Charlie says we're not in lockdown?
That is a good question. I don't know all the answers to that. That is luckily above my pay grade, and I just have to respond to what I'm told I need to provide. So, I think that the town is being as cautious as possible on these things, and even with having the meeting in the gym, that is so that they can have chairs spaced 6 feet apart, all the social distancing stuff. So, it'll definitely be a different town meeting than anyone's ever lived through, I'm sure.
Oh, I guess voting will be with the cards, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's either verbal or with cards or hand count. No, there's. I think you have to ask for a secret ballot, basically, and I don't foresee that happening on many things that are going to be voted on right now.
There can be a secret ballot in a town meeting? Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, let's move on then. Brief technology updates. Library is still shut down.
Yeah. Right? So the one thing for library is they are looking at replacing their public copier. It has basically broken beyond repair at this point, and their contract with the current vendor ran up. I want to say it was 5 years ago or so. So the company's not interested in renewing at this time. So we are looking at getting them to a Xerox machine that is, from the same vendor and whatnot that all the other copiers are from.
Was it a coin operated copier?
It was a coin op, and this would be now card card enabled. So
Too bad I should have gotten a picture of that while it still existed.
yeah, they still have them, but yeah,
Okay, good. I
there's
need somewhere to find the nostalgia of
yeah.
equipment from the 70s. and
There
80s.
was some discussion around that. There's some people that don't carry a card. Well, maybe they hand the change over to the desk and you just punch it in or whatever. So, so we're looking at that. I think that's going to be with state grant money. That's the plan. So we're probably going to move forward with that probably come July. Just I expressed to Ryan that there wasn't an immediate need to do it like today, because even when the library does resume operations, it's going to be in a very modified way when we first open the doors. So, we're still in discussion with how everyone's going to run their department and whatnot under all the different phases. So, so that's the only thing on library, I think.
How about any other technology needs of the library? Has the library been doing any sort of online virtual events, book readings, and so forth?
As far as I understand, they're doing a lot of things on Facebook or using personal Zoom accounts for some of those things that are less than an hour. If it's story time or whatever. So they're, as I understand it, they're working closely with youth and families to kind of coordinate online programming. Okay.
That's great. Okay. School administration. I guess Andrew's not here. Can't comment on that. Do you have any visibility into that?
No.
All right.
I have something to comment on the technology documentation.
Great. Yeah, that's the next one, is the town administration, including technology documentation. Yeah.
Okay. I had a conversation with Jim Hegarty this afternoon. He consulted a lawyer friend of his who said that it turns out we, the Municipal Technology Committee, can deem something to be a non-public record. And we also are the ones who can decide that it's worth the risk, that if somebody came along and wanted the documentation and was not willing to accept a redacted form, then the town would have to go to court to defend, or to explain why we weren't going to cough up all the information. The other thing Hegarty said was that there is some effort trying to pass a law in conjunction with the public records law that would basically deem certain types of information as non-public records, right? So this would be one of them. So my suggestion is that we go ahead with this effort. We deem it a non-public record, essentially take the risk. But I think it's more important to get this information down so that when Tom brings somebody in, he'll have something to give them as a starting point. And if Tom goes off somewhere else, we'll have something that someone could use to come in and pick up what Tom is doing.
Yeah, this refers to all the documentation, architecture diagrams, procedures, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would still.
My proposal is that, as I sent out an email, is that basically I interview Tom on a selection of topics, and then transcribe that essentially into more documentation kind of form that's adequate. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll be adequate for giving to somebody else or knowing what's going on. And it would also be adequate for the committee to look at in terms of planning or whatever.
I think it would also at least be a starting point, is what it comes down to. Now, one thing that I kind of realized from my personal standpoint, it would be good to put the same effort eventually and plan for it for the school side, just to, I know that schools aren't an active participant in these meetings as much, so that kind of limits the visibility, but the bylaw does not focus completely on the town, and that's kind of how some of it comes across to me. I'm just going to be brutally honest on that. So
yeah, the bylaw covers the school administration, and so
Right,
we
so-
need to have representation here and visibility into what's
Yeah.
being done among.
Well,
So, but, and that's not to say that we need to not go forward with doing the town side, because I think it can be a good model anyway for what can be produced for the schools as well. So
So one of the things that we might want to also consider, based on the sort of set of things that Will recently went through with Jim, is that it could be that each section of the document actually is split into two parts. One part that is publicly available and the other part that's not. And, it could be in some cases 50-50, in other cases it could be 90-10, and in other cases it could be 10-90. But the point is that some amount of what might get documented here is not going to be secret information, and the public ought to have access to whatever the developers deem as non-secret. And that will in some cases mitigate any pressure to release, or to say, well, I want to see the whole document, and you can say, well, here's the public part of the document. So that might be something to consider as it gets developed, is to clearly identify, this information can be made public, this information is cloaked.
no, I think that's a very good suggestion. I mean, certainly while we're going through it, we can sort of add that in as a commentary, and then I'll make certain that it's indicated in any documentation that I produce.
Yeah.
I guess the other good thing about a redacted form is just that it's something that if somebody asks, well, what is the Municipal Technology Committee doing? That's something that we can show them. And also, if issues come up about what are you basing your planning on, well, that's also something that the document can support as well. So that'll be great. And I think that what I'm hoping is that this is going to be a minimal footprint on Tom, trying to make certain that he's basically not doing or having to do anything except talk, and then perhaps proofread documentation later. But if we can get that rolling, I don't see any reason why we can't do the school as well, right?
So I will say that I am working a little bit here and there to do some of these, some notes here and there. So, I think it's going to be, it's good for me to go through the exercise anyway, because it gives me the starting point to provide to you. So now the one
might also provide some aspects of it, might actually provide some training opportunity for your new person for digging up information that's needed. So you get two goals. One is the new person figures out what the details are, and secondly, is able to describe it to whoever's writing the document.
Yeah. One thing that I would like to get clarified is whether or not you're expecting to include administrative passwords and whatnot in this documentation.
No.
Okay, good.
No,
I wanted to make sure of that, because it's one thing to have employees have that and change it when an employee leaves, but if we have volunteers that have that information.
On the other hand,
so that being said, I would certainly provide my master password to the town administrator in a sealed envelope type thing, so that,
I was going to say, it should indicate how the passwords can be
obtained
in an emergency, but it should clearly not have any passwords in it.
Yes, I'm just making sure on that.
To that point, we should probably, it makes the most sense to decide exactly what are the archetypes of information contained within this documentation.
Yeah.
And what of those archetypes of information, which are ones we would deem public versus which ones we would deem sensitive. And obviously there's potentially different levels of sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
and which ones we basically want to redact versus provide public. So I think it would probably be better to if possible, I'd love to like decide on that and vote on that, just on the types of information, like is an architecture diagram, is that something we would be redacted? Is the complete inventory of all the systems, is that something that would be redacted? Is the, contact information of our support or whatever, is that obviously information that would be redacted?
And we'll, we can certainly do that. I think it'd be best to do that, when we have examples in front of us, right?
Yeah.
Tom, Jim Hegarty, when I was talking to him this afternoon, he did have one question, which I assured him was taken care of. And that was just, he was interested to know that there were policies for how often employees have to change their passwords, and also what is an acceptably secure or complex password.
Yeah.
And I assured him that, yes, you're on top of that already.
Yeah. So it's coming. It's just, it hasn't been implemented. And this was actually something I was going to bring up before all this craziness happened. The idea that, it used to be that changing the password every 3 months was what was recommended. Now I'm seeing more recommendations that as long as it's a strong password, it's fine to leave unless you suspect there's a breach. And if you suspect there's a breach, then you change your password. That being said, I might err on something somewhere in the middle, where it's maybe annually change your password. I have working experience of how insecure every 3 months is. I have gone around to desktops in places that did that and just lift the keyboard and there's the password.
Yeah, there have been studies on that
So,
the more often you make people change their passwords, the less secure they end up being. So
yeah. So
ultimately, we need to move to some model that includes multiple factors, though, right?
Yeah.
That's a related note. I think, Tom, you and I have discussed this before. Is I'd love to see somewhere in the budget and somewhere in the plan, the actual plan, to unify our authentication, at least the authentication, potentially authorization as well, but at least authentication to town services across to an SSO provider, like obviously I think that we have a subscription for, and you've already mentioned this before, Azure AD, and then putting in front of that, we could put a SAML or OIDC provider for all these web services, right?
The biggest issue with the Azure AD is it's great for board and committee members right now because I have all of you managed directly in Azure AD. Okay, so I can set password policy there. You can change your own password. I haven't set it up yet, but if you forgot your password, you can go in and reset it yourself. I can't do that for the town side right now, the employees that we are managed on the local AD and synced up. The write back from Azure to local is quite expensive for the licensing. So that's a hurdle right now, but there may be a way to move forward with using Azure as the primary where all passwords are changed. So that's something down the road to investigate.
Yeah, if we used Azure as primary and the local simply as a replicated secondary, would that cover?
So that I'm not 100% sure. That's in my list of things that I'd like to investigate as nice to haves, but not immediates. So
sounds good.
By the way, I don't know if there's any opportunity to request this, but one thing I would say is that, Azure is, sort of can be your master password keeper, right? Obviously, LastPass can be your master password keeper. It's mine. And then there are, half a dozen other reputable things that you can use. And the thing that's unfortunate is that, like Facebook, I don't think there's any easy way to extract and then, move from one to the other, right? That if, for instance, it would be a complete nightmare if I decided that I wanted to go from LastPass into something else. I mean, it would take me days and days to do.
Yeah.
But the difference is, though, with a single sign-on provider, basically you'd configure all services to unify authentication up to that provider. So there's basically literally a single provider for all the web services. Whereas opposed to LastPass, which is a password manager, right? It basically is local storing of all your password and on all of the different systems, etc. So the problem is today, the town, each of the town services for each of the town employees has unique identities, and so it's replication of identities across tons of services for all these
And
town employees, which is
some of that.
I actually use LastPass for not just for passwords. I mean, that's sort of the smallest part of what I use it for. What I do is that, anytime I buy something or I've got some, weird piece of information about, buying a warranty or things like that, or, I've got a new ID or whatever, I put that information into LastPass, and man, that has saved my butt in several cases. In fact, today it saved my butt because, I had all of the information I needed to get a rescue done. It's going to be done on a drive that's gone bad. So I use it for that. I put everything into it. I put notes, I put 1-800 numbers into it, and I just find that to be fantastic because I don't never have to worry, where did I store this information, right?
Yeah. So a lot of that will also depend on the providers themselves, the actual applications, whether or not there's some that won't go to, because of their architecture.
Single sign-on. Yeah. I more and more so, though, any
new updates are going.
Reasonable application has the ability of supporting a single sign-on, either through OIDC or SAML.
Yeah.
It's like out of the box. And basically the idea is maintaining islands of credentials is a security liability.
Right.
So the more we can hand it off to a single unified provider, the better, and it also simplifies life for our users. And in parallel to that, that's how you handle multi-factor, right? You don't have multi-factor for that application and multi-factor for that application, and multi-factor for that application, right? It's just a single multi-factor.
Right.
Well, I would say, I understand. I mean, the credentials are very important, but, for instance, let's suppose that Tom's not around and a server goes south. Where is all the information stored about who can service it, who we would call, what the number is, what the serial numbers we would need, what the contract numbers we would need? I mean, that information is probably kind of scattered. Not because Tom's not doing a good job, but simply that there's probably not necessarily any one place where he can store all that stuff.
Yeah, that goes back to the docs that you're going to be putting together with Tom, and the sensitivity of certain portions of those docs, including contact information of support and serial numbers and model numbers, complete inventory. What do we consider? I assume that the detailed inventory of all the assets of a town, virtual and physical, may be considered sensitive information. And
that I'm not sure. I don't know if that would be. I mean, it comes down to asking yourself if someone can do adverse things with that information, or if they're just going to start reaching out going, oh, well, I see that you buy Dell computers, so why don't you buy from us instead? Which
true, but I'm saying like things like model number and serial number, there's some things you can do, like registering. I don't know.
Although
site for support.
That does raise the issue that if there's going to be a distinction between static information and dynamic information, and things like model numbers and serial numbers are relatively dynamic. And if we're going to include things that have some amount of dynamic content, then there also needs to be a procedure documented on when and how it gets updated. Otherwise, we're going to go open this book 2 years from now and find out that we have the model numbers of all of the servers we owned 2 years ago and none of the servers that we own today. I think that I'm not saying we should or shouldn't include dynamic information. All I'm saying is if we do include dynamic information, it actually creates an additional burden of ensuring that it gets updated in a timely fashion.
I think you'll find that we'll be pointing to where that information is,
Right.
because I have a couple different systems that end up being an inventory, including the antivirus system, the central management of that, and the patch management. Those both, I can kind of cross-reference them to see what is missing from one or the other, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm totally in agreement with that, Tom. I don't want to reinvent the wheel here, but I think it would be nice to have like a list somewhere that says, here's all the pointers
Yeah.
to all the different types of information you might need.
Yep.
Here's where they're stored, and here's where
Definitely.
it's updated. So if you need to go and find our current inventory of this or that or the other, here's where you would go. And there might be many different places where you would go, but that's fine.
Right. So I think we'll be able to work to something that will, again, at least get us started.
Right.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Any more any more discussion on that topic? Town administration technology.
I guess one thing I think it would be nice for us to have a motion and to vote on it that we go ahead and create this create this documentation. Just so that it's we have a record that it is the will of the committee, that we go ahead with this.
Sounds good. Now, obviously, what you're creating, as we discussed before, some of it we will probably deem sensitive, and your proposal is that we wait until we collect that information to determine the classification of that sensitivity. Is
right.
that correct?
Exactly.
Which means we probably need to have, in a future meeting, if we're going to be discussing this, we probably need to have a closed door, closed session.
Yeah. So either that, right? Or, we'll be able to come up with probably categories of the information that we can
bring back.
I think we can say,
then we vote on those categories,
yeah,
and then we can decide. Okay.
And it might be that if it's a full document review, that might qualify for an executive session under I don't remember exactly what rule it was, but under that security rule.
Yeah, security rule. Yeah.
So I mean, can I go ahead and make a motion then on this?
Yes.
I move that that we proceed with creating a set of documentation that tries to be as comprehensive and I guess as detailed as we deem necessary, and that this documentation in its original form may not be something that can be released to the general public.
Can you provide a motion that is, don't take this wrong, but can you provide a motion that's more concise?
The other question too. So once we collect this information, can we be forced to release it?
Well, that is something that I learned in the conversations I've had, is that yes, we could be. The process for that would be that someone would come and say, I want all this information, all of it. And we would say no. And so they would decide that they want to take us to court and make us explain the information that we don't want to release. Now, at that point, first of all, I think it would be kind of a low probability that someone's going to do that. Secondly, if someone goes into court and says, well, I would need all of this very sensitive information, I think a question that the judge would ask is, why? Why do you need this? And I think we would, probably be in a pretty safe territory that the judge would say, well, at the very most, you're going to get a redacted form, right? But as it turns out, even something like the username password list conceivably is a public document that someone could go into court and say, I want to have that. Tom, give me the username password list for all of your credentials. And, as far as I can tell, talking to the AG's attorney of the day and talking to Jim Hegarty in the talks he's had, it is absolutely possible that someone could do that. And in that case, the town would have to go into court and explain, no, we don't think this is a good thing.
I guess
That-
just where I was going with that is simply, we should understand what we're gathering, why we're gathering it, how we're gathering it, how we're going to secure it. I think before we push forward with, pushing for people to start collecting that data. That's just my 2 cents on it.
And I agree with you. I guess I would say that Tom would be a good.
Wait.
What?
Just in terms of Robert's Rules of Order here, I think we should get a motion on the floor and seconded before we actually have discussion of the motion.
Okay, yeah.
What
Do
is
we have a second?
what is ITSM in your agenda?
IT service management. This is just a generic term, basically IT service management documentation.
Right. So I mean,
yeah.
How about I'll put words in Will's mouth and then he can agree or disagree. Move that we proceed with the development of an IT service management document with the understanding that some of it will be public and some of it will be kept protected or something like that. And that gives us a little bit more flexibility in terms of where we go.
I think that's a wonderful formulation of it.
So it was service management?
IT service management, yeah, ITSM.
Management.
So if you can repeat that, that'll, I think that's
Okay,
a great
so
motion.
Will is making a motion that we proceed with the development of an IT service management of IT,
Service management.
I won't say
documentation.
and, of IT service management documentation with the understanding that portions will be, what's the word you use, Tom?
Protected.
Protected from public disclosure.
I accept that rewording of my motion.
Then I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? Let's discuss on deliberation. So
Okay. Jeff, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was just trying to.
I think what Jeff is bringing up is a good point. But let's be very careful and deliberate on what type of information. Is there any type of information that we're excluding from the discovery itself? And how is it going to be stored?
Yep.
How is it be handled, etc. Does that summarize, Jeff?
It does, yeah. I just think having a clear direction. Why are we collecting this? What it's going to be used for, and then branching out from there.
And I will say that this is part of the reason that Will had suggested recording our conversations, and that's one of my reservations about recording is that, again,
Potential discovery.
right, and if one small portion of it is that protected information, but the vast majority is public, then we have to deal with that. So I definitely get the fact that recording definitely gives a better ability to get the accurate information transposed from the spoken word to written word, but it is just a reservation that I have.
Well, I don't think would be any problem with if I could record a conversation, transcribe it, and then delete the recording.
Except that if it's there's retention rules and whatnot to deal with. So just something to be aware of, and we just need to, I think, to Jeff's point, just be deliberate about how we collect the information. And it's not that I'm trying to hide anything. It's just let's go back
to the purpose. And I think understanding the purpose here, the primary directive of why we're doing this is to, first of all, help as this tool for this additional aid that's coming on board to help get them up to speed. And also that it'll serve as a key test of the documentation. Like in an ideal world, this would be a clean room situation where, this new person that's coming on board doesn't ever talk to Tom directly. This person only reads the documentation, and there was a deficiency in the documentation. That person goes to Will or emails Tom and say, please update the documentation. So it's concept of knowledge-centered learning, right? You document the knowledge on somewhere and you learn from it so that you can retain it. So that's one purpose. And the second purpose is making sure that if Tom wins the lottery and wants to fly to Jamaica tomorrow and live his millions of dollars there, that we have some level of coverage or continuity just in case Tom goes away and lives on a beach for the rest of his life. We don't say hit by a bus anymore. That's not,
Good luck on the lottery, Tom.
Yeah. It's much better than the last meeting when we were talking about my demise. So,
Well, we could always say, Tom, that you went to a farm in upstate New York. Right?
No, he really did buy a farm.
So, yeah. So going back to the point in discussion, are there specific things that we like? For example, I think we made it clear that as part of this process, we intend to not collect any credentials, right?
Right.
Specifically passwords, or possibly even usernames, right? That's outside the scope of what we're collecting. Now, a link to where we would discover usernames would be interesting, but not anything like lists of.
It could be a process for doing that, right, rather than a link. But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I would also say public IP addresses would be documented somewhere, but not included in, or they would at least be protected. They would certainly be protected because there's no need for us to put that information out there and basically put a big invitation for someone to try to breach.
Yeah, you're talking about IP addresses that would be reachable from a public network, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And no personal information, names, addresses, phone numbers, anything like that.
Right.
That's another thing that really should not be in the document.
So if
we
the
can
sole
refer
purpose,
to people by position, but not by name.
so if the sole purpose of this is IT specific, help desk admin, things of that nature, have we looked at tools like a land sweeper or a Trackit or any of those that could help with automating this process and organizing the storage of the information?
I think the short answer right now is no. But what I would recommend is that we kind of keep it as simple as possible to get a first draft down, and then once we have that, we can look at it and say, is there a tool this would fit naturally into that would facilitate keeping it up to date?
And I think it's a mixture of both, a little bit of a tool in terms of inventory, but mostly it's around procedures, right? Documented processes and procedures. Is that right?
Right.
Well,
right. And
as well as architecture, where are all the fiber runs? Where do they terminate? What switches are there? Where are those switches? All of that kind of stuff, especially as our town-owned fiber infrastructure increases, those kinds of things becoming incrementally more important.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing a lot of tools, especially asset inventory tools, have ability recording location, physical location information, and various other pieces of metadata. So it's a good point. Maybe even if there's low cost or no cost options, something we should.
No cost is going to be preferable right now. Everyone's being cut, so I'm down to bare bones for next year. So as of right now.
Okay. What else? So first, I'm going to make sure we covered Jeff's concerns in this. Is there anything else, Jeff, that we haven't covered?
No, that was it. I just, from a high level, wanted to bring that up.
Yeah. So do we include how, in terms of the rules of order, do we need to do anything to capture that summary? Basically, sort of very specific details like
only
maybe
if
capture the password.
only if somebody wants to offer an amendment to the motion on the table.
Yeah.
And again, I would probably not be too specific, but you know, if we covered a bunch of things in the discussion about no passwords, no credentials, no IP addresses, no names, no personal information. I would be reluctant to sort of be that specific in the motion, but if there's an amendment that captures the gist of that.
Yeah, how about an amendment, say any sort of PII or other sensitive information?
I think that it's still within the original motion, you know, reflecting the discussion. So,
Right. The motion on the table is move that we proceed with the development of IT service management documentation with the understanding that portions will be protected from public disclosure.
Perhaps we amend that just to say, and also with the understanding that certain types of information will not be included in the documentation simply because they are too sensitive.
Yeah, yeah. PII, personally identifiable information.
We'll say that again. Amendment thing. And
the amendment would be with the understanding that certain types of information will not be included in the documentation simply because we feel that they would be too sensitive to, you know, even to include in non-public documentation.
Yeah, I like it.
That certain types of information will
not be included.
Not be included.
I think you could probably stop right there.
Okay.
But,
yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So that's we need a motion to the amendment.
Okay, I'll second. I'll assume that Will is actually, since Will made it, can we assume that that's a friendly amendment and not deal with it?
Let me ask myself. Yes, it's a friendly amendment, and yeah, I think that's fine. Can we get a second on that as well, on that amendment?
Sure, I'll second that also.
Okay.
So let's
take
a vote.
Move that we proceed with the development of IT service management documentation with the understanding that portions will be protected from public disclosure and that certain types of information will not be included. Could I amend that to say due to their sensitivity?
That would be fine with me, yes.
Yeah, go ahead and do that. I think that's what Will originally suggested. Yeah. And then, so what we need to do is let's take a roll call vote on the amendment, and then we'll take a roll call vote on the motion.
Well, if Will's willing to accept it as a friendly amendment, I think we can just change the original motion and call the question on the whole thing.
mm-hmm.
I am willing to accept it as a friendly amendment.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion on the revised motion? Okay, if not, roll call votes. I'm in favor, yes. Larry?
Yes.
Will?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Unanimous for motion passes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Will and Tom, for being willing to go through that. It'd be good. Okay, next item on the agenda is public safety. Are there any updates on public safety, new public safety building? How is the technology working out? How radios, all that
Yeah,
stuff?
so there is a capital item this year for radios, which has garnered some debate with advisory. And that was that some members of advisory thought that the discussion last year was that was all we were going to need was what we did. And both Chief Paulus and myself, our recollection was that no, the stuff that we asked for last year was to get what we had up to date, and then we would have to evaluate once the new building opened. So There's still some dead spots, and we knew that that was going to be the case because we didn't change any locations or anything. But there is going to be, actually, there has been some work by one of the firefighters who is very knowledgeable in radios to test the digital coverage. And his initial testing has proven much better coverage in some of the dead spots.
So the dead
So-
spots are only with the old analog radios?
So that's what they're running on right now. They're running on the analog. So the capital request, as I understand it, is a little bit of study, but also some equipment to be able to completely enable the digital capabilities of both police and fire radios. DPW is coming on board very soon. We got some of the equipment in, from what I understand, and we're just waiting on some more of the equipment before they are brought on board, and they will be brought on board full digital. Okay, so my recommendation to the chiefs was that once DPW is on board and up and running on digital, take one of their trucks out and see in those dead spots how the coverage is. And
So DPW is joining the same.
yes, the same equipment. So they're going to be on their own frequency, but as a third public safety department, they'll have the ability to all communicate during an emergency.
Use the same repeaters, etc.
Exactly. So just different frequency, different antenna type thing. So.
And had they previously budgeted for their radios?
Yeah, that was actually part of the reason that we got into seeking out. I'm forgetting his name, but the gentleman that did the review for us was that DPW had a capital article from 3 or 4 years ago at this point to upgrade their radios. And then it got to the point of, well, hold on, don't do anything because police and fire may change their stuff when they go to the public safety building. So, so we did get the ball rolling again about a month before we got shut down. We got the FCC license for the channel, and the equipment, like I said, has been starting to come in. So they are going to be getting that up and running, hopefully by the end of summer.
That's great.
Okay.
Tom,
Yeah.
6 months ago or a year ago, we had a lot of discussions about the fact that there were pieces of copper that were, in our network for the radios.
All gone.
Pardon?
It's all gone.
It was all
Good.
stolen.
So-
The price of copper went up and people stole it.
No, no. What happened was, so we did the run up to Overlook through last year's budget. I think it was a capital article. It was either capital or operating, but either way, we did that one. And then we were going to address EMC, hopefully with the state grant that I ended up doing for everything else. The problem is when we went to move into the new building, Verizon said, we're not pulling copper into the building. So, so it was either invest money for Motorola to certify the solution for a year or two, and then move to the copper, or just move to the copper. And we ended up doing a reserve fund transfer to cover that.
You mean move to the fiber?
Yes, move to the
Yeah.
fiber. Yes.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I was going to say we were going to move backwards. That would be
No. No. So it was kind of funny because the person I kept going back and forth with at Verizon, on a vacation, by the way, because I got the phone call from them on my way out on vacation, was trying to tell me that no, you didn't need to invest in this other equipment. But then I had Motorola saying, yes, you need to invest in it in order for us to certify that it's going to work. So and when it came to public safety, I erred on the radio vendor, not the wire provider. So
And remind me, where are we on the rec center leg?
Yep.
And
So
DPW leg?
funding has been received. I have the switches already configured. They're sitting now in my office at work down Southborough. I configured them here, but we're just waiting for Governor Baker to give contract the green light to resume work, basically. And then they have to fill their schedule. So
The fiber run to EMC complete now,
yes, yes,
and the extension to DPW?
that's part of the
It's on
that
hold
next
till
phase.
this.
Oh,
Yeah.
so it's going to go
Phase
to
of opening.
DPW in the rec center. That's part of the same project.
Yeah, and also the cemetery administration building. And I've been asked to investigate doing the historical building, the museum building that's on the other side of the parking lot of Town Hall, because the fiber actually runs through that
It
building.
runs, yeah, it goes there through the building? No, it runs right past it.
It goes through the building. So, you know, just at the time, I didn't realize that we had operations there, basically. But so I've looked at it, and you know, it will probably get done in the next year or two, if not as part of this project. So
Why don't you just get commercial Wi-Fi and do the entire parking lot and around the building, including the historical building and
well, so I know there's a whole history of Wi-Fi in that neighborhood, so I won't
okay,
I won't go into that in a meeting.
Yeah, we didn't have on our agenda tonight to talk about 5G because, yeah, if we had some 5G towers, we could set them afire and.
Yep.
Well, by the way,
all routed.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just gonna ask, has there been any motion or movement on 5G? You know, getting into Southborough?
Not that I've heard.
Okay.
So, and again, I probably wouldn't hear it. So,
yeah, Verizon's still, I think, still chugging along on that. It's moving slow. I don't even think there's dates for Boston yet, are there?
I don't know.
I haven't heard.
And as I said, when the policy was being reviewed, that, you know, Verizon's going to go for anyone that has no policy at all first, I'm sure, and then they'll start challenging the other policies. So that's my feeling on it, though. But anyway, that's again not on the topic. So, but so back to radios. You know, so there is going to be an article at town meeting. I don't know if it's going to be spring or fall, but really it's a little bit of study, but also to just get past that last little bit. So we're really hoping, at least I am hoping, that we come back without needing to do another tower, because that's just going to be a nightmare, finding a location that the residents aren't going to be concerned about having a tower in their neighborhood and then running fiber to it, and there's a lot of logistics to it. So I'm really hoping that the digital will help and provide the coverage they need. And I understand from the expert that we talked to that digital isn't going to solve all the issues, but will it make it better and manageable? That's what I'm hoping.
A good question.
So,
yeah.
Okay.
I assume that the person who's in police or fire right now that's been doing the experiments, they know very clearly where the issues are, and they once the DPW or whoever moves over to digital, they can just go to those areas and do some testing, right?
So he's actually set it up so that they can test it with a handheld unit. So my understanding of that is that the handhelds aren't as reliable even as the vehicle mounted radios. But that being said, you know, the handheld is what police have to rely on once they're out of their vehicle at a stop or an investigation. So that's probably the best bet to test anyway. So
are the vehicles themselves reliable?
Yes. Yeah. Well, so I think they still have dead spots. And both police and fire know exactly where those are. You know, they could rattle off probably at least the street, and I would be surprised if some of them don't even know that, hey, I'm crossing house number 5. I'm going to lose my connection in a minute. I know I used to be able to do that with my cell phone riding through town, that, oh, I'm going to lose you right about now. So.
By the way, talking about losing, have we had anybody in our, public safety contract COVID-19?
That's not in my purview.
Okay.
So that's.
I was just
That'd be-
wondering if there was maybe a rumor or something.
Yeah, no, that's and even if there was, I wouldn't speak to that in this meeting.
Okay, good point.
How many dead spots are there? I mean, I don't expect an exact number, but the number of dead spots in town, is it like a handful or is it like dozens? Or
That I'm not sure, but I know that from the public safety departments, one dead spot is too much.
right, but I'm wondering, if it's a very small number, is there technology that would provide for doing, say, internet-based repeaters so that you could effectively have a small cell in that area that's connected over the internet and simply fix the dead spots? I mean, if there's dozens, that doesn't work, but if there's a
that's not how I understand it to work. But again, that's my understanding, and I'm not the expert in that field. That is why we pay the vendors to do some studies and to make the recommendations for
yeah,
what equipment.
traditional radio, both regular as well as even digital, relies on just very simple basic repeater technology. So it's not like GSM or CDMA where there's actual digital handshake and signal. There's a full authentication, etc. Even the digital ones, I think that the authentication is limited. So, and in fact, there's a whole handoff from one to another is much more limited. It doesn't function like a traditional cellular network where you can easily hand off from one to another. So, but your question is a good one, Larry. I mean, I agree. If there's some simple technology.
I mean, now that it's digital, it strikes me. I mean, I don't understand the details of the system, but now that it's a digital system, it strikes me that adding smaller repeaters in various places, if it's a small number of spots, might be feasible.
So the one thing I do know is that it is very sensitive to delay, basically, and it has to have, has to fall within thresholds of any signal delay in order for it to do all that handoff and the repeating appropriately. Again, a traditional, car radio, you don't care if you're 5 seconds behind someone else receiving that signal. But in public safety, it has to be, real time as much as possible. So, again, this is stuff that's not in my wheelhouse, and it's something that I will rely on the experts that we employ and contract with to provide the best solution for us to move forward.
Do you have any idea how the radios in the vehicles, any idea about the antenna characteristics of the radios in the vehicles? Because your antenna is everything around signal for both reception and transmission.
They're public safety standard. That's all I know. They're not doing anything that's below public safety quality. So I can only imagine that they're designed for greatest coverage. The issues, as I understand them, are topographical. Hills, trees, all that cause issues. So
yeah. All right, interesting.
Okay.
Recently I officially joined the Framingham Amateur Radio Club and been getting more involved in that. So I'm sitting right next to a 2-meter mobile transmitter here, and I built my own J-pole antenna and so forth. So it's fun technology, but it makes complete sense if there's dead spots and that it's hard to get around. So, all right. Great. Anything else on public safety?
Nothing I can think of.
Okay, strategic tech plan. Obviously, we're not reporting anything in this town meeting. We'll see about if there's a fall town meeting. So I would like to still, we don't have to take time today to talk about it, but I'll contact, we previously discussed moving forward and updating sections. So I'd like to keep that in our back pockets for when we do have a town meeting and need to report to town meeting. Technology use surveys, still planning to get a Survey Monkey account. I'm interested moving forward with that.
So one thing on that is, again, with some of the upgraded Office 365 licensing, we do have access to Microsoft Forms as well, which is another easy survey tool. That's, we're already paying for it. Now it's right now the only people that have that level of licensing are employees, but it would be certainly something that I could work with someone to
Okay.
set up. So
I'll take a look at that and discuss with you
yeah,
the possibility. Obviously, there's a big difference between something like Google Forms or Microsoft Forms, which I'm guessing I've never touched it, but
yeah,
I'm guessing Microsoft Forms is their response to Google Forms.
but probably
Is very different than a traditional a full-fledged survey tool that has a lot of built-in analytics and so forth.
yes,
But,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised to hear you talk about forms. I know, throughout my career in IT, forms, no matter whose forms they were always horrible. Has Microsoft improved their forms now to the point where they're actually usable?
I mean, so I don't know if any of you took the or did the acknowledgement of the email policy, but that was Microsoft Form, very simple one. That was my first kind of publishing a survey out there. So I haven't looked at the whole analytics of it. But again, it's something that we have access to, and I bet we can do some of that analytics to our fairly easily ourselves too. So, we ran into a situation personally that we put a survey out and we got to the 41st response, and well, now you have to pay the $300 a year to get that 41st response. So it's a great problem to have, but also we didn't anticipate that. So
what about Drupal? I mean, that
yep, that's the other one. The forms was just a little bit easier to build.
Okay,
so that's all.
I mean,
Google.
I learned Drupal and I really liked it. Actually, I thought it was pretty straightforward. It's simple, but it's straightforward and it works.
Yeah, Drupal and Joomla equivalent those are basically content management systems, and they have a lot of variety of plugins for things like surveys and so forth.
Yeah,
obviously Azure or Microsoft Survey, I guess it's just very very much like Google Survey, which is just sort of drag and drop questions and question type and whether a candidate responses very basic.
I've used Woofoo and it's just like that. Same thing. Drag and drop different question types in place.
But again, I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware that is an option.
An option available.
So.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. And actually on the surveys, going back a bit here into whether or not Zoom will continue to be a format used, it may be a good survey to throw out there that, hey, have you participated in a meeting, in a remote meeting? Yes. Would you have participated if it were in person? Those types of questions.
That's a great question.
Yeah. Because if we have the data to provide the selectmen can then provide that to our reps at the state level, and they can report back. So
yes, good point.
So
good point. Okay, I'll put some questions together. Potentially, we can put on our next meeting. Okay, I don't have anything else for this meeting. I would like to schedule our next one or review the schedule for the next one.
There was one other thing that I remember has been on the agenda previously and is not at this point. I'm looking at the room and seeing 4 voting members.
Yes, it's finding an additional person. Yes. We're down one.
Yeah.
I think as the follow-up, one of the follow-up items from our previous meetings was for I think I volunteered to go through various contact lists for the town and see if there's anybody who we might want to reach out to, and or contact my South Borough and put out a notice saying, hey, any volunteers.
Yeah.
That's
And we can put that
still,
on
still
the,
good strategies.
yeah. I would recommend to have a news announcement, like to draft a news announcement for the town site, which is then picked up by my Southborough. Okay, because again, driving the source of information to the town site is one of my goals.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Yep.
okay.
Okay. So I'd be happy to draft something just
Okay.
announcing the open slots.
Yeah.
Do we need to take a vote on that?
No, I think if you draft something, send it over to me, I can get it posted.
Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else we should be covering today? Anything I missed? Oh yeah, let's grab the calendar for our next meeting.
So if we follow our plan schedule, it would be June 16th, the third Tuesday.
Yes. Does that work for everybody?
That would work for me.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to be away, but it doesn't really matter.
As of right now, it doesn't anyway.
As of right now, yeah, we're planning to be in Pittsburgh to visit the kids that week. But I'll be able to attend the meeting, assuming it's on Zoom.
Yeah. Jeff, does that work for you?
My audio broke up just a tad. What was the date?
June 16th. It's a Tuesday evening.
Oh, one request would be, Matt, is
Oh, no, sorry. June 16th, you cannot meet. That is the town election day right now. And the town bylaws preclude anyone from meeting on an election day.
oh,
Okay, thanks for catching.
good to know.
Anybody propose either the week before or the week after, the 9th or the 23rd?
So looking at the calendar, it's actually June 13th is the town meeting. So I will say for me, the 9th might be a little hairy, but you guys don't necessarily need me to vote to meet. So, but it will also possibly be a hot time for selectmen or advisory to be meeting as well. So I'm just throwing it out there.
I'm okay with either.
I'm okay with either as well.
Right, and it sounds like based on everything Tom just said, that we'd be better off doing it on the 23rd because town meeting will be behind us and there might be additional things to discuss.
Sounds good.
Yep. Okay. So 23rd, anybody who cannot then do the 23rd? I think I heard most. Larry, are you okay with the 23rd?
I'm okay with the 23rd.
Okay.
And the 23rd will also be a non-public room because selectmen have the 23rd. I just happen to have the calendar in front of me.
When you say non-public, you mean a non-public Zoom room?
Right. So no public comment.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So,
Unless we've decided, hopefully, maybe to pick up a second webinar room.
Yeah, again, a lot of that's going to depend on the guidance that we receive over the next month and how boards and committees are scheduling. So
Are we going to be, the 23rd would be a Board of Selectmen meeting night as well?
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the remote meeting room, no public comment, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead and lock that in and send out the invite.
Okay. And I will get that set up. I'll set that up tomorrow.
Okay, sounds
Yeah,
good.
there it is.
In that case, I will move adjournment.
I
And
second.
All right. Do you think you do a roll call vote for the
Yes, you do.
adjournments? Yes, for me. Larry,
Yes.
Will,
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. The meeting is